I'll frame it up like this. We've all heard the adage of Google is replacing the solutions engineer, right? And we know that knowledge is available to anyone. And so what I prepared is just a kind of a story today, talking about the democratization of data and how it is just so pervasive. And remember, and we'll get into it here in a second, but when you used to buy a television 5 years ago, right, you had to go to Circuit City, right? And when you went into Circuit City, there were these guys in the red shirts, and they'd come over to you and impart all this knowledge on what we would call, the consumer. And I'm convinced that people have changed the way they buy. And most importantly, the way they buy services. And so, the Transparency Sale, if you haven't read that book, I'd highly recommend it to you. But essentially, the concept is, be transparent with your potential prospects and clients, because they know 90% of what you know. And so what we've challenged our team with is, how do we differentiate ourselves, right? We have our unique, we have all the things that make us great, but at the same time, the only way to cement that long-lasting relationship is to tie it back and engage emotion. And that's what storytelling has really done for me. And believe it or not, I've prepared 2 or 3 stories that I tell often to share with your distinguished audience today. And if it's okay, I can get started.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think while you pull that up, right, like I think it's such a unique thing for pre-sales people, and like it's almost a scary thing, right? Like step away from data points, speeds and feeds, and like be a part of the story, right? As you're having this conversation with a client. So I think I think it's just a really unique thing to bring to this space, which is very much pre-sales technically focused, and I think it's a skill set that we honestly miss a lot, right? And that's what makes a really good pre-sales engineer, SE, SA, whatever you want to call them, is someone that can do exactly what you're talking about. So
yeah, I think you're right. And I think from my perspective, what I've seen, and I've worked with guys, not quite as talented as you, but on a day-to-day basis, and the ones that I see, continue to win, and really have success, are the ones that can not only map it to the customer's outcome they're trying to achieve, but also storyize it, right, and put it in a place where it's memorable. And I think I actually came up with a story around Scope Stack, and I'll share it with you, and hopefully you can use it as you face the juggernauts of your world. So
awesome,
great.
man. I didn't even ask you to do that. Look, you're
This is what I'm going to try to do for you today, John. And I'll start by saying,
okay.
the impact that you've had on our organization, and kind of what we're doing is really great. So I appreciate
Thanks,
that,
man.
for sure. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right. So you let me know when you can see me, and I will. I'm not going to put it in presentation mode, because even though it's 2022, I still don't have all this stuff figured out. But I'm not on mute, right? So that's a good thing.
No, you're not muted, and we can see your presentation, so you're all
Okay.
good.
Great. So when we talked earlier about the democratization of data, it makes me think of this story. And I heard this story, a long time ago. And before I get into it, would it be appropriate for me to share a little bit about what Katalyst does? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think
Okay.
y'all are, some of the
Good.
leaders
So
in the
I think,
space. So, yeah.
yeah. So I think for those of you that don't know why we exist, we align to provide a competitive advantage to our customers, and we've specifically bucketize the offerings and the services that we deliver. And so I'm proud to say we continue to see this massive shift. Nobody can get product anymore anyway, physically, right? So
Right.
what we're doing from a cloud perspective, and really optimizing our clients in the security space, is big, and it's about half of our business today. And then the other areas, we have what we call core and chore to our business, and these are some of them. But I always like to just kind of let people know where we're coming from. And so the title of the presentation, selling with stories, are you building a house of cards, based on knowledge versus wisdom and storytelling, really makes me think of this story. And we all have heard about Kevin Spacey and some of the terrible things he's done, and that sort of stuff, but that's not the point of the story. What I wanted to share with you guys today in the audience, John, was really around the data and the importance of it, right? And so if you don't believe that your customer has as much information as you're fundamentally wrong. And I'll go to the grave saying that because I think it's just a fascinating thing. Again, you take the Circuit City experience or Best Buy and you morph it into where we are today. Everybody knows everything about Scope Stack. Everybody knows everything about Katalyst before they even engage with us, right?
Right.
And so what we've tried to do is kind of make it memorable. So here's a story for you, and maybe you'll find it relevant, maybe you won't. But it's really about the power of data, and then we'll talk about how we utilize that to storyize it. So 3 icons on the screen here, images for you. Obviously, pretty much everyone in the world knows who Kevin Spacey is. At some point, they've probably seen a film, or a TV show that he was in. Netflix is ubiquitous. Everybody knows what that is. But what you may not know is this guy on the right. And he's a guy named David Fincher. And David Fincher is a producer and director and has done a lot of great things. But what Netflix did, John, 7 or 8 years ago, is they literally used the data that they had from their viewership. And they said, we know every time John Scott pauses a show or a movie, we know when John Scott comes back from that pause after his popcorn's done cooking or he gets another drink or whatever the case may be. But we also know how likely is John or anybody else to complete that show, movie, or series, right? And so what they did was they took this data and they started modeling it. And what they found was, to me, striking. The first thing is that the majority of people that watched a film or show with Kevin Spacey in it tended to watch it to completion, right, to the end. Then they said David Fincher, again, another producer and writer and all these sorts of things, he had the same accolades attributed to him, that every time somebody started to watch a David Fincher program or movie, they had that same likelihood. And the third leg of this stool is that there was this ill-known show that came out of Britain called The House of Cards. And they said, it's not widely known. We don't have the press and publicity on it, but everybody that watches that show tends to watch it to the end. So what did Netflix do? You know where the story's going. They made a huge bet, a bet so big they were ridiculed and mocked, and they spent $100 million making this series, right? So if you think of Hollywood and kind of average movie spend and TV show spend, it was grossly, over provisioned from a resource perspective. But they paid for that investment in 4 months of new members just based on that show, right?
That's crazy.
And so when we talk about why you should care about the democratization of data, it's because your clients and your consumers probably have a much better understanding of your organization, why it exists, what you do, and a lot of it is based on what other people say, right? And so that's a fascinating story to me. I don't know if it's relevant to you, but it's okay. You asked me to join this, and I'm happy to be here. So we'll go from there. The other big thing and kind of shift is why we've really addressed and led with storyizing some of what we do at Katalyst is around many of our clients have changed the way they buy, right? And what we've seen is lots of organizations haven't changed the way they sell. And so that intersection in trying to stay out ahead and provide our clients with relevance has forced us to think a little bit differently. But again, the Best Buy is the iconography here, the Circuit City. Just think about all the interactions we used to have where we would have to get knowledge from an expert or a person or a thing, right? And now we possess all that. And so again, this whole data democratization thing, I think is big. And it's something that's really challenging in our business. And what I put together here was something that I shared with another audience. But if you just think about, and I know there's probably a lot of technologists on this call, but if you think about what we would say, the rapidness of how fast it's growing, right? What we've seen is this continuing to morph. We have OEMs, selling direct. We have partners getting cut out of conversations. We have this screaming for relevance with our clients, right? Which is really what's happening in the market. And so how do you differentiate, right? How do you differentiate? Because your consumer, your client, your B2B, whatever it is getting fed data in a much more friendly way. And so that's a great thing. And I think it's really level set and raised, the bar for every organization that still exists today. And we're excited about it and kind of where it's going as well. So what I really wanted to focus the theme on was around stories and why we use them and how they made an impact for us. And I'm going to take you through eighth grade English here real quick, just to make sure that everybody is familiar with the narrative arc and kind of what happens. But really, stories have four fundamental things, right? They have characters, right? We all know that. Most stories have contact or conflict or climax or some sort of, pinnacle of the event. And then there's a resolution. Sometimes they, believe it or not, don't always go the way we want them to. But at the end, there's this new normal, right? There's a result. There's something that happened from that interaction, and it's something that kind of resets. And to give you this picture visually, this is really what a story looks like, right? And so again, taking your clients through this journey and taking any conversation through a story-ized arc is a much better result, I think, than data points, right? And using stories to capture data and make it memorable for your clients is something that's very powerful as well. So I've got a couple more stories that I wanted to share with you. This is a kind of a proud dad story, and I think if nothing else, it'll tell your audience a little bit more about me and what I care about, and what my values are. But I'll just share this with you guys because stories too are opportunistic, right? Some people think that luck is a skill. Some people think that good things happen to good people, right? No matter what your philosophy or stance is, I wanted to share this story. And you may have guessed by the name that this is my firstborn son, and he's a senior at Clemson. We just wrote our last tuition check. That's another story for another time, but we're excited about that. And looking forward to seeing him walk across the stage here in May. But this story is important, again, to capture the opportunities of storytelling and why you should always be ready to evangelize your thoughts in story form. So my son, he was an RA, and he didn't want to be an RA, and he brought that with much resistance. And he said, "Dad, I don't really want to be an RA. I want to do the regular college thing." And I said, "That's fine. You can do that as long as you come up with the delta or the difference, right, in the cost of your education." He said, "Well, maybe I'll be an RA and save some of my money and go from there." So he was an RA in this program called the Clemson Life program. Clemson Life is an opportunity for mildly special needs people to attend university and have that true college experience, right? And so some of the RAs lived with some of the more compromised or challenged individuals. Some of them were able to function and live on their own, which is great. But Davis had befriended this young man named Zachary, and they had built a relationship over the semester. And move out day came, John, and it's May, it's hot, you're in Death Valley, so to speak. And Davis tells this story of loading Zachary's possessions up in the vehicle that his parents had driven to pick him up. And the mother, Zachary's mother, said to Davis, you seem like a good communicator and a squared away young man. What are your plans for the future?" And Davis said, John, something along the lines of, "Well, I'm a communications major, and my dad's really pressing me for what I would say getting a job in my field, right, and that sort of thing. And he's got a boot in my rear to get moving on that. And I don't really have any people calling me back. No one's engaging me, right? Maybe I'm just going to wait tables, et cetera, et cetera." And that night, Davis received an email from Zachary's father, and that individual introduced himself and said that he was impressed by his handshake and his ability to communicate and tell a little bit about himself. And he wanted to sync him up with his vice president of corporate culture. And that individual ended up being the chief executive officer at TE, which is a spinoff from Tyco Electronics, as you may remember. and Davis earned an internship there and worked doing, guess what? Nothing but storyizing the product manager's history and taking the tech out to make it more relatable in human terms.
That's cool.
Right? Yeah, it is a really neat thing, and it's something that I think is again, in that moment, right, he was able to share a story. Maybe it didn't have as much persuasion or as much influence as you would have or someone else, but the point is that they remembered that engagement, right? And that engagement led to something good. And part of it's being a good human being and helping others and that sort of stuff, but at the same time, the fact that he was able to use a story of his personal journey, so to speak, that led to an opportunity for him. That's exactly what we want, right? We want every new customer from an existing customer. You want every new customer from an existing customer. And so how do we use this to kind of leverage the success we've had and those sorts of things, I think is always interesting. Is that a relevant, component to you, John? I know you guys are
It
looking
is.
to
I
grow.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that story, right? And I think I told you the first time I heard it was like, just makes me want to hire Davis, right?
Yeah.
But, um, so I think it is extremely relevant for all of us.
Good. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to just impress on the listenership today was again why you should use stories. So we talked about how everybody has the same amount of information. We're now all equal in knowledge, but we're not equal in relationships and in emotion and in scale. And so when we talk about the Katalyst storybook, like we have a book of stories that we use for opening conversations, for conflict in conversations, for closing, opportunities, all of these sorts of things. And these are becoming intertwined in our process. And the sellers are very interested in using these to their advantage and that sort of stuff. But remember that stories relate to whatever problem you're trying to help your client solve, right? And so if you think about telling a story or an outcome of a previous engagement that you may have had, and then using it to influence a new customer, to move an engagement forward, that's a very powerful thing. The emotional side of stories, right? I'm going to tell you one more story today, and everybody that hears this message will remember 2 or 3 key data points about it. But what you do is you actually tap into the emotion of the buyer, right? You tap into the emotion of the client or the customer, and you're able to get a leg up over, a data example or a data sheet, if you will, right? Because nobody cares about that, and leaders don't care about, how good or fast or strong your organization is. They care about saving their organization time, money, and lowering their risk, right? That's at the end of the day why these people buy things.
Right.
Stories are timeless, meaning they never, they don't go away. If you think of Moore's law, right, and how fast technology leapfrogs itself, you remember when you bought your first Pentium MMX machine for $2,500, and now your iPhone is 7,000 times faster than that, right? So like trying to keep up with technology, which is what we all have to do to some extent, it's really difficult to be the SME in every technology. You remember when we started out in our careers, we knew 1 or 2 things, and now our clients expect us to know 1,000 things, right? And that's one of the ways that ScopeStack has helped us in learning from success and failures in other instances, and we can continue to evolve and create more profitable engagements with our clients. And then really stories scale, right? We've all seen these onboarding and enablement plans for solutions engineers or for new sellers or whatever the case may be. And what you'll learn, John, is that stories can be up to 22 times more memorable than just facts, right? So you you onboard a new employee, you want to quickly realize, their contributions. Well, how do you do that, right? And so sure, there's training, and sure, you're buying talent and that sort of stuff, but nobody coming into your organization can be a SME in everything that you do, right? We at Katalyst think about hiring people for culture's add, not culture fit, right? That's a big thing. Like we want to continue to evolve and get better. And so we need to tell them what our uniques are and really how we expect them to behave and all those kind of basic things. but when we storyize the solutions and what we deliver to the market, it's much easier for them to really remember. And then lastly, which I think is important, is when you engage in storytelling, you're speaking to a completely different part of the brain, right? You have the crocodile brain, right? Your brain is meant to evaluate risk and shut things down and that sort of stuff. And what we're doing is we're getting into a completely different section of the brain, and we're engaging emotions and really tapping into to what I think is a very powerful concept. So I'm going to take a sip of water and ask you if you have any questions. I didn't want this to be a monologue. That's for
No,
sure.
no. I mean, I just get kind of enthralled every time you're talking about this. I mean, but you're so right in that. I mean, we try to tell good stories, right? Like the story that we tell anytime we talk to a new prospect or client is very much, it was my story, right? And other folks on our team's story, which is I used to scope a bunch of projects. I was using spreadsheets and Word templates, and I had to work at night because I was doing all these meetings during the day, and like that affected like personal stuff, right? Like it wasn't just work related at that point because it's seeping into other areas of my life, and we wanted to fix that and solve that. And like there's this like very real pain for those of us that have lived it, that it just strikes a chord, right? Like at that point, people are like, yeah, I want to do whatever it can do to fix that problem. So
Right.
I mean, we try to use it, and it's just telling, and I think that's where we have had some, level of success is like, it's authentic, right? This is not, hey, look what software can do. Look at, all these things and all this stuff. Like that is a piece of it, right? That is not, at the end of the day, why we did it,
Yeah,
so.
and I think that's an interesting component to the message is a lot of us as leaders, right, in our spaces, we focus on correcting weaknesses in the team. And I think what ScopeStack's enabled us to do is really amplify our strengths, right? So we're really good. You've given us more time to be in front of our customers, less time locked in an office or a conference room in a Word document, copying and pasting from old things with mistakes written with wrong stuff and names. I mean, you've done this for
Yeah.
years. In fact, probably why you guys created the organization for which you're now leading. But the point is again, focusing on weaknesses and fixing those versus amplifying strengths. What I want to do is get my masterful storytellers in front of more client conversations and have less time right in front of their console, because that's the only way we're going to succeed, I think,
Right.
as an organization. So
Yeah.
okay. Well, do you want to hear one more story? I've got one
I
more
would
for you
love to.
if you're
I would
interested.
love
And
to.
this is kind of the scope stack story, I think, and a little bit probably of all of us if we came from an organization. Now this story is retold, so I want to give credit to the original storyteller here. And he was a writer for Sports Illustrated for a long time. But this story really speaks to me. And remember that narrative arc as we go through it, because I think what it embodies is, living your dream, right? Choosing your passion, understanding that you're going to be faced with adversity, and you think about, who you're competing with on a global scale. And I don't know what your competitive landscape looks like, but I think this story really resonated with me, and why I chose it for this conversation was just about you and your company and kind of what you're doing. So do you know who that guy on the screen is, John?
I mean, I've heard this story, but I cannot remember his name.
Oh, well, that's shame
Warwick
on me.
Dunn.
Yeah,
Warwick
that's
Dunn?
right, Warwick Dunn. That's right. So, and I'm not a big sports guy, which is ironic here. And so I'll if you're not a sports guy either, or sports gal, don't worry. It's not a story about sports. It's a story about something much greater than that. But a few years ago, Warwick Dunn took a handoff, crashed through the line of scrimmage, and John, he became only the 22nd player in the history of the NFL to rush for over 10,000 yards.
Wow.
Right? And you think about that. That's 5.6 miles of running, right? Getting knocked down every 9 feet, right? Over and over and over and over. But what's even better than that is that Warwick Dunn, by more than 20 pounds, is smaller, right? So here's a scope stack, correlation here, than every other player to ever reach that journey, right? And so you think about this guy and what he was able to accomplish, and all those facts are great and awesome. 5'8", 178 pounds, 22nd player to ever reach this pinnacle of achievement. But what's even more awesome is his life story, and that's what I wanted to tell you briefly today, and I'll tie it all up, I promise, here at the end. But Warrick Dunn was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to a police officer named Betty Smothers, and he was the oldest of 6 children, and lived somewhat of an underprivileged life. Didn't have a dad really growing up, and just some of the adversity that we see today. And he was so good in high school, John, that by the time he had reached his senior season, every major head coach of any formidable football program in the ACC and SEC had made their way to Betty Smothers' couch to ask him if he would play football for their university, right? And so it's his high school senior season's behind him, and he's making this cosmic decision about where he's going to go and play. Heavily recruited individual, and on Christmas morning, he and his mother, after they had done handed out gifts to his siblings, they sat down and they reviewed the final 3 scholarship offers that he had. And that afternoon, they chose to call a man named Bobby Bowden from Florida State, as depicted here. And they told Coach Bowden that he would come play football for Florida State in the fall. And to this day, Bobby Bowden still refers to that conversation as the best Christmas present he'd ever received. So you think about that, it's like that one call you get from somebody about something that's important to you, and it changes your life trajectory, right? And so here we are. Warrick has made the decision, and he's off to the races. Well, 12 days later, John, Warrick Dunn received a phone call, and it was from the Baton Rouge Police Department, and they were calling to inform him that his mother had been shot and killed in a bank robbery. Warrick, obviously dealing with things that he didn't know how to handle, was obviously deeply stressed and just completely dismayed by the situation. Of course, Coach Bowden had heard about it, and he called Warrick Dunn and he said, "Warrick, we know that things are different for you. We know that you have a family that you'll now be leading and taking ownership of. And if you want to stay in Louisiana and play for LSU, we'll understand, no hard feelings. You can break your commitment." And he said, "Coach, my mother and I made that decision together. And I'm not going to dishonor her today by backing out of my commitment. I'll see you in the summer in Tallahassee. I'm just going to need a larger apartment," right? And so Warrick Dunn continues his journey. He brings his 3 younger siblings with him, put them through elementary and middle school while he attended college. And he didn't just play football there, right? Yeah. He led Florida State to their first national championship his freshman season, right? And so all this adversity, all these, I can'ts, these mindset challenges that he had, the depression he went through, all these sorts of things, right? He emerged as the all-time, leading rusher of that university, and, won all these, trophies and the Walter Payton Award and just all these wonderful things, right? But what's important for you to know is the story continues. And again, we make choices every day. Lots of little ones, lots of big ones, intermittently. But the NFL draft came, and Warrick Dunn declared, a draft candidacy, and Tony Dungy, who you may or may not know, he's a great man who's also dealt with a lot of adversity, chose and selected Warrick Dunn as the 12th pick of the overall draft, right? And he was standing in the press box, and he was being ridiculed, and they were hurling insults at him. Things like, "Coach, why would you waste a pick this big on a player so small, or this guy is one 300-pound lineman away from ending his career, right? All these kinds of you can't, you won't, whatevers. And Coach Dungy said something that I think is remarkable. He said, you may judge a man by their weight or height or size or strength, but I judge a man by their grit and their heart. And by that measure, I will show you that Warrick Dunn deserves to play in the NFL. And again, Warrick Dunn went on to have this wonderful career. He went on to do, reach heights that were unthinkable and unreachable for many people. But he did that and made it to that pinnacle, right, with all the adversity that he had, because he displayed grit and he had belief, right? Certainly he had a great offensive line, of course, as well, but 5'8", 178 pounds, right? Just shouldn't have been there. And when I was thinking about Scope Stack and what you guys are doing and how you're changing, and evolving the market in which I play in, there are a lot of similarities. One is you're not a juggernaut, right? You're not a Salesforce. You're not a NetSuite. You're not a ConnectWise, whatever. And here you are interrupting and showing organizations that there's a better way to do it. So what's the so what to this whole conversation? The so what is, I challenge everybody that listens to this, whether it's in their personal life or in their professional career, storyize your message, storyize your sales cycle, build relevant conversations that your clients will care about using stories, not by telling them data points that they can look up themselves, right? That the whole factual based questions and those sorts of things, that those days are gone. And I'm convinced that that stories are the way, to help elevate this community in which I'm proud to be a part of. So I don't know if that hit the mark or what you were
It
hoping
did, man.
for.
I mean, if I could slow clap and it would resonate across the Zoom, I would. But I mean, I think it's, again, as I mentioned earlier, like the piece that we want to emphasize, right, is like we have to change. So we have to change the way we're doing things. We have to change the way we're selling, to your point, right? The data is out there. No one needs us to tell them data points. They need to tell us how to get to the outcome and like what are those wrappers around it, which is partly the story, or a big part of it's the story, right? So you had mentioned a couple of books, and we're actually going to post a link to an article that you wrote that has a couple of others that you recommend.
Sure.
So y'all should, if y'all are interested, please check out the link that we just posted in the chat. It's a link to some books that Jesse recommends specifically related to this topic. So one, we just want to give you this, what I think is awesome, presentation, but also some tools to again, help you change and help you become a better pre-sales engineer and solution architect, right? Sure. Jesse, if anyone wants to reach out to you, is there a preferred way to contact you? I mean, again, you're wealth of knowledge, right? And so if someone's curious to learn more.
I appreciate the compliment, John. I'm still learning every day, and if nothing else, LinkedIn's really the only way to get a hold of me these days. But yeah, happy to collaborate. There's actually a storytelling conference in Nashville that I'll be attending this year. I'm excited about that.
Oh, cool.
And you think about, we've been telling stories around campfires for thousands and thousands of years, right? You think about all the things that we do in story form. It's really important to me, and I hope, if nothing else, it struck a chord with you guys today, and how you can transform and upend your conversations with whatever business model you're in. Yeah,
it did, man. And I'm gonna put your LinkedIn profile there too. So if you have any questions for Jesse, team, there's some info right there in chat. But Jesse, thanks, man. Really appreciate you hopping on, and best of luck to y'all.
Thanks for the invite. Talk soon, John. Thank you.
All right, man. Bye.
All right, see ya.